Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I've got I wouldn't even say friend of the show. I mean, he's pretty much co-host at this point. Paul Jamieson's back on to give us a market update about what is going on in the UK property market. We all know when you go on market appraisals, people want to know what is going on both locally and national as well. And it's your job to know that information. So Paul is the main man over at 28 and we've nabbed him back on the show. So Paul, as ever, thank you for coming back on.
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me back. Obviously didn't do a terrible job last time.
You passed. You passed to come again.
Thanks.
So thank you very much, nonetheless. So talk me through. So we're now kind of just in the beginning part of 2025. From your perspective, then, how you describe the current landscape of the UK property market? What trends are we seeing right now?
So, um, in my opinion, part of the year, so there shouldn't be too many estate agents listening to this because you should be really, really busy. And we're quite bullish, I think, for 2025. So, obviously, we're only a month in, so we've got to bear that in mind. But I'll run through the numbers in a sec. But yeah, it looks like one of the strongest starts to the year we've had. Years definitely. Um, so yeah, it's looking good.
Good. And what are the sort of the factors you think that kind of key into that? So I appreciate so this is probably going to come out in a few weeks' time. So we are the day of or day before of a potential interest rate cut. Is it the interest rate levels? Is it just people are really kind of like just want to get moving now? What kind of the main sort of factors you think are kind of making the market looking so good for 2025 so far
Yeah,
anyway?
yeah. I think there's a few factors at play. So I mean, I'll go through the numbers and then perhaps answer that as I'm talking through the
Right. Yeah,
numbers.
go for
So
it.
um, so far in 2025, supply, which we measure by new instructions, is up 7.3%. So and this is on January last year, which was a decent month for instructors anyway. So we're finding there are more properties coming to the market, so there's lots of new instructions now. But crucially, there's not too many instructions coming on, which kind of floods the market with too much stock because demand, which is what we measure by sale agreed, is up a whopping 17% on last January. So we've got a good supply of properties coming to the market, and there's a really like high level of buyer demand, snapping those up. So that's really good. I think why is that? I mean, it's been like that since the start. Yeah. Initially, my view was actually potentially people trying to beat the stamp duty deadline on the 1st of April. And that was one of the reasons, which I think is probably some of it. But as we know, that if you're agreeing sales now, you're not going to, in the vast majority of cases, you're not going to be completing before the 1st of April. So while I think that probably has a small impact, I think it just actually shows just the general level of consumer confidence is a lot higher. So I think we saw really in the tail end in Q4 of 2024, it was a similar story. There were lots of sale agreeds going through. So I think we're just seeing a higher consumer confidence. Inflation's under control. Interest rates are probably going to get lowered today at time recording by another 0.25%, which should kind of add more fuel to the fire and increase that activity. So I think it's just overall people are kind of cracking on, and perhaps people that held back last year have just decided to either list their house or look to buy a house or both.
Yeah, cool. New year, new me, and all that. So,
Yeah,
okay, so supply is up by 7.3%, and demand is up with regard to number of buying properties at 17%. So, demand is outstripping supply compared to last January. So,
yeah.
what that had to do with kind of average prices and sort of on that sort of the pounds and pence side of things, I would assume they are up by a percentage or two compared to last year. How's that looking?
Yeah, so prices are in a pretty good place, I think. So they've year on year they're about 2 to 3% up, which I think is a pretty healthy place to be in. Again, lots of commentators for the last 12, 24 months have said prices are going to fall, prices are going to fall, and it just hasn't happened. They've remained fairly static and actually are creeping up now. So it's good in terms of I mean, in terms of available stock. So if we look at what's actually available to buy January versus January 4. So available stock is up about 8%. So there are more properties to choose from now. But again, a healthy amount. It's not if you have really high kind of available stock, that's when kind of prices start to fall. So we're at a good level of available stock, and crucially, we've got lots more kind of sale agreed stock going through, which is filtering through from last year. So, and the reason that's important is that obviously will quite soon filter into actual transactions, exchanges, money in the bank for estate agents. So compared to January last year, we're 25% up on sale agreed stock that's kind of going through to completion exchange, which is a big figure. And we actually had quite a sluggish start to the year last year from a kind of exchanges transactional point of view, because of the kind of high interest rates before that. So what that means is there should be money in the bank earlier on in the year for Q1. You kind of have kind of small pipelines, and the money doesn't necessarily translate into your bank account. But what we're finding is actually exchanges and those sell agreeds going through are quite high. So it's been a positive start to the year in the sales side, I think.
Good. So, well, all estate agents, give yourself a pat on the back for holding on for dear life for those deals going through your
Yeah,
pipeline. Seems like they've taken absolutely forever. Sounds like right home straight, and some of them are actually turning into money. Who knew that was an actual thing? They actually go through
yeah.
to completion exchange.
That I mean, that's the only. I suppose that's the only blip is the transaction times. They are still. I mean, it's still kind of 75, 80 days to agree a sale and another 4 months to complete it. So it'd be great when someone finally cracks this sales progression side of
Yeah,
things.
one day. So is that days to sell? Is that it getting better or is that getting worse? I think selling quicker or slower compared to last year.
Well, it definitely crept up over last year. So kind of 12, 18 months ago, it was around 40, 50 days. So it's quite quick. And that's definitely got slower in the last kind of 12 months. It's a bit. I haven't actually got the stats for January this year yet. So, but my gut is it will be around that the same point. But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think. Yeah, I think it may well quicken up because there's lots of, say, with higher demand. You theoretically think that would filter through to quicker times to agree a sale. But yeah, it's that sales progression, please, days to completion, which is the killer, really.
All agents listening into this will be nodding along dramatically and probably nodding and shaking their head all in one go, sort of thing. So absolutely. So what about the regionality, if that's even a word, of the sort of property market? Is it sort of London's great at the moment, but everywhere else is terrible? It's great to be up north, but down south is terrible? Is there sort of a regional split at the moment, or is just everything looking pretty sunny?
No, it's pretty much across the board. There are obviously I always get challenged on this because obviously I have to use kind of national statistics and people, and of course there's going to be regional variations or changes town to town, but we as a business can't possibly report on every locality and what's happening. We do have the data obviously, but it'd be a very long podcast if we did that. But yeah, like from the data I've seen, it's pretty much across the board in all regions. Which kind of then lends itself to that kind of just general consumer confidence in the nation, I think, or that kind of British, okay, it's not going to get any worse or any better. Let's crack on.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that is a British mentality. It's not getting any worse. Why not? Glass half empty and all that. So, what other good stats have you got for me? Because what behind the scenes here, people probably think that we prepare this in advance, and I've got a long list that you say, Chris, ask me this and ask me that. But really, I just throw questions at you and hope that you've got the answers, and 99% of the time you
And
do.
so
So,
do I.
so what other key figures have you got behind the scenes that agents can take advantage of?
So price reductions, let's go there. So
Yep.
last year there were a lot of price reductions. I think over 1 million price reductions,
Wow.
which was the highest since like we've started recording. So it especially in the first half of the year, stock was just going on at ridiculously high prices, unrealistically high, and agents were having to reduce that and reduce that. What we found already this year, price reductions are significantly down, which implies that at this kind of start of the year, property is being priced a bit more realistically. So it's going on at a more realistic price, and sales are getting agreed without the need for that reduction, which is good all round in my eyes. So we've done some research into price reductions, and actually, um, you're more likely as an agent to sell a property when it doesn't need a price reduction.
Yeah.
So actually, if you, which sounds a bit, a lot of agents go, well, no, if I get loads of reductions, it'll be cheaper and I'll sell it. It's not actually the case. You're more likely to actually complete if you get it right first time and it doesn't need a reduction. And secondly, it will sell quicker if you don't need a reduction because
Yeah, I think I remember Rightmove doing some stats at Property Mark 1, I think. And I think that back then, which was probably about, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, they were saying 1.35 times more likely to sell if you don't have a price reduction. And if you do a price reduction, you do it between about week 3, week 4, that sort of direction to give you the best chance. I think if you wait until week 8, you reduce your chance of selling by about 10%. So it goes from like
yeah,
uh, 60% sell to 50% sell from memory, and the odds of it being withdrawn or falling through later on and changing agents go through the roof sort of thing. So I'm going to be glass half empty here, if that's okay. I'll be very
yeah.
British. So do you think it could be a case that actually agents are still valuing at the same sort of price they had last year, but where the market has improved over the last 12 months or so, or certainly more recently, that sort of their valuations have come true, if that makes sense. So last year you might have said, oh, it's 300,000. Actually, the market wasn't there to support it, and therefore kind of price reductions came through after that. Whereas this year they're saying, oh yeah, it's still 300,000 sort of thing, but actually the market now kind of backs them up going forward and says, actually that will now tolerate that 300,000 effectively.
Great question. I'm not sure I know the answer, but yeah, maybe I'll go with glass half full and say the
That's fair
standard of
enough.
the state agency and valuing's improved over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, but no, I think it's probably a bit of both. There's probably definitely some of that to
Okay.
play, but I think I think some of it's probably more with vendors rather than agents because I'm not saying I'm not saying this necessarily should be the case, but I think a lot of vendors dictate the price it goes on at rather than the estate agent and say, well, I'll only use you if I go on at this price. And some estates go, okay, go on then, we'll try it, which I'm not saying is the right thing to do. But I think where vendors probably this time last year were going, no, I want it on this price, I think they're probably going, actually, I can't necessarily do that anymore and being a bit unrealistic, a bit more realistic. But that said, if there's lots more buyers around, then again, what happens typically if vendors know there's lots of buyers, they might try and chance their arm and sneak the price up and list it a bit higher, knowing that actually hopefully someone will do. So yeah, it goes in cycles, doesn't it? So we'll track it and monitor it and see what happens. But I think there are definitely significantly less price reductions. There's also less withdrawn properties.
Okay.
So we're seeing already less properties are being withdrawn from the market. It's obviously early days still, but what that indicates to me is that there's perhaps more serious sellers out there who kind of want it to get sold and again are pricing it more realistic. So I think to summarize all that, instructions are up a healthy amount. There's lots of kind of buyer demand and lots of sales going through. Exchanges are up, price reductions are down, withdrawals are down, and prices are kind of sneaking up. It kind of, when you say it like that, it sounds almost like the perfect market. um, but you don't know what's around the corner. So we'll see what happens. But I think as I say, I'm quite bullish about 2025. We finished up in 2024. We'll finish up about just over 1.1 million transactions,
Mhm.
which again slightly low, but that really is down to that really sluggish start in completions last year. The fact that we've made that fast start, I'd hope that there's going to be at least 1.2 million at the very least this year, which is what we kind of see as a normalish year. And I'd hope, touch wood, providing nothing major happens, which I'm sure it will, that we could be even higher than that.
Good. Excellent. Any other good stats in your locker?
Um, we can perhaps touch on lettings because obviously
Right, go for it.
I've
Love it.
focused on the positives, which is the sales market. So
How's the landlord exodus going?
yeah, so I think that's slowed down. I mean that we know that definitely happened. So landlords definitely exited the market last year, especially in London. Like I can't remember the stat exactly, but towards the end of the year, nearly 50% of London instructions were previously rented in 3 years before. So nearly half of the stock coming to market in London, the sale stock, was actually previously available for rent. So there was definitely a kind of exodus of landlords, but also the price rents have just been going up and up, and I think tenants have just wanted to stay in their existing properties longer. Whereas a tenant might find a new rental property every couple of years or something. They know that if they if they do that, their rent's going to go up. So I think that's added to kind of a shortage of stock because tenants want to stay in their property a bit longer to avoid that rent increase. I think in January so far, just looking at the numbers, so there's been a slight drop in new instructions coming to the rental market, probably for the reasons we've just given, but only a slight drop, so about 3% down on January last year. But demand is still up, so about 7%, and we know that demand is there for rental properties, but there's only enough demand for the amount of properties on. So the bad news is it's that the kind of, and I sound like a broken record with this, the problem in lettings is availability and affordability. So current letting stock that's available to rent, so you're looking to rent, is about 15% down again on this time last year. So there's still less properties to rent, which is bad news. The good news, I think, is when we look at what price rental properties are coming on the market, that's actually dropped quite significantly. And I mean, they've risen horrifically over the last 5 years, almost to an unaffordable rate in some areas. But the stock that's the new instructions that are coming onto the market at the minute are about 15% down on last year. So again, it looks like landlords have, I don't want to say got less greedy, but they're pricing it on a bit lower than they were last year. But what's actually, when we look at let agreed prices, that is still creeping up. So I think that gap between what's coming on the market and what's actually getting let is coming down, which is a good thing. But let agreeds have crept up prices have crept up about 4%. So that kind of average rent is sneaking up, but it's definitely slowed. the pace of increase has slowed, which again I think is a good thing for affordability.
But surely, if you're looking at the supply of rental properties coming on the market down by 15%, and you're looking at the demand of tenants up by 7%,
Yeah,
you're looking at less properties coming on the market to rent, and there being more tenants looking around for properties. I mean, surely that's only going to go one way with regard to price in the long term, unless there's anything,
yeah,
huge.
and yeah, you're exactly right. It's supply and demand. The available stock's still shrinking. The demand is still there and increasing. And unless there's a flood of new stock to the market, they build more homes. Prices are only going to go one way. So prices are still going up. It's just the rate of increase has slowed down. But I think that has to, like, there comes a stage where people won't be able to afford to live anywhere if it doesn't slow down. So I don't. It's kind of like, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But there's definitely, I mean, I've been saying this for 2-3 years, and it's still not been solved. But there is a bit of a lettings crisis. It's a horrible place to be if you're a tenant at the moment.
Yeah, quite. Cool. And do you have the stat with regard to how self-employed estate agency is growing in the UK? Because I know you normally you're kind of it's up by a couple of percent this year, whatever it may be. Do you have that sort of stat to hand hidden away somewhere?
I think last year it was about 2% of the market. It's definitely growing. I haven't got the actual stat on me, but yeah, we know it's growing, and we'll continue to track that. It's a really interesting place because, I mean, you speak to a lot of agents each week, like I do, but so many agents that I'd say are traditional kind of market town agents are trying to kind of incorporate some kind of self-employed element into their model to retain staff, to modernize, to reduce costs for a variety of reasons. So I think the self-employed kind of phenomenon is just snowballing, and it's here to stay. It's going to keep gaining momentum, and I think for me it's really interesting to see what some of the bigger corporates do, because I've not really. It's a lot of the independent agents that are kind of looking at this route, as well as obviously the self-employed brokerages themselves. But there's not. Don't see many of the corporates kind of looking at this. I know LSL have launched a self-employed model. Yopa are looking at a self-employed associate model, but yeah, some of the really big corporates have stayed clear. That perhaps monitoring it and got plans in the background, but Yeah, I think it's inevitable. It's going to just turn into a bit more of that American model, and it's just how quickly it happens, I think, is the question.
Well, thank you so much for coming on all over again. We'll have to have you on again in a couple of months' time, Easter or whatever it may be, to update with what's been going on, and hopefully the bumpy year we're having so far continues to be as bumper as it has been already. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.